An anonymous letter, an impossible accident, and the most powerful woman in the company, forced to disguise herself as a frontline employee just to uncover who's lying, who's staying silent, and who is about to pay the price. This isn't the story of an ordinary CEO. It's about a woman who stepped into the shadows, where every trace of evidence had been wiped clean, where the killer might be the one signing off decisions, where speaking the truth could cost you your job or your life. But she didn't come to talk, she came to prove. And when that moment arrived, before hundreds of people under the bright lights of the auditorium, she stood up, removed her glasses, stared straight at the trembling supervisor, and declared, "I'm Olivia Renner, and I know everything you've tried to hide. You won't be able to look away from this story, because the deeper you go, the more you'll realize some systems don't collapse from outside attacks, but from the moment someone inside chooses silence no longer." Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. It was a gloomy midweek morning. Weak sunlight had just begun to pierce the thick clouds hanging over Denver, casting a faint glow through the tall windows of the top-floor office at Silver Line Express headquarters. Olivia Renner, the newly appointed CEO, stepped into her office. She was the first woman in the company's history to hold the position, a leader known for her practical style, unafraid to get her shoes dirty, to understand operations from the ground up. Today marked her 6th day taking over from her predecessor, who had retired suddenly due to health reasons. On her spotless desk, amidst neatly sorted documents, lay something completely out of place. A pale yellow envelope, no sender name, no postal stamp, no address. Olivia paused. Carefully she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in black ink, the handwriting precise and cold. "I don't know if you'll believe me, but if you want to save lives, investigate the Denver Rock Ridge line. They've covered up a fatal accident, and if no one steps in, there will be another victim. You have power, but do you have courage?" No signature, no name, just one chilling line at the end. "Come before everything gets erased again, like last time." Olivia sat up straight. Her heart rate quickened. Though now a CEO, she had once been a rail systems engineer, and her instincts told her this wasn't a prank. She immediately pressed the intercom button. "Marcy, who was the last person to enter my office yesterday afternoon?" "No one but the cleaning crew, ma'am. I can check the cameras if needed." No exposure. I want a list of all personnel assigned to the Rock Ridge line this week. Send it directly to my machine. No CCs." She hung up. Her eyes remained locked on the letter. There was something in the way it was written, not a threat, not a plea. Just a quiet, desperate voice from the inside. Minutes later, as her assistant brought in her morning coffee, Olivia had already begun typing the first line of an internal deployment memo titled, "Liv Monroe, Temporary Dispatcher, Rock Ridge Line." She knew, to find the truth, she had to go to the station herself, and this time, she wouldn't return to the office with clean hands. The early train from Denver rolled into Rock Ridge Station at 6:04 a.m., cutting through the bitter fog that blanketed the industrial western corridor. On the platform, morning shift workers were preparing to inspect the engines. None of them paid much attention to the slim woman in a hard hat, pulled low, and safety goggles hiding half her face. Liv Monroe, the alias Olivia Renner had chosen, stepped off the last car, carrying a technician's backpack and a worn-out tool bag that looked like it had followed her through years of frontline labor. She wore a silver-blue uniform with reflective stripes and a fake employee badge wrapped around her wrist, convincing enough to pass through the temporary personnel barcode scan. A discreet camera had been expertly clipped to her collar, recording everything she saw. She had been assigned as a support technician for the morning shift in the maintenance bay, a known data blind spot in Silverline's automatic reporting system. Here, all documentation was still done by pen and paper with manual sign-offs. Senior supervisors at HQ couldn't remotely monitor anything in real time. On her first morning, Liv was paired with Benji, a quiet, seasoned technician with a kind demeanor. He eyed her with mild curiosity. "You transferred down from Denver?" "Yeah," Liv replied briefly, filling in for someone on sick leave. "Heard that one's out long term. No one really asks. Around here we mostly look after ourselves." Benji guided her past a row of cars being inspected. Olivia immediately took note. Missing standardized maintenance logs, components removed without explanation, and extended intervals between brake tests. At the shift roster board, one name stood out in bold: Jonas Blake, Technical Supervisor, Rock Ridge Line. Benji glanced up at the name, then leaned in and muttered quietly, "Watch yourself around him. Nobody crosses Jonas around here, unless they're ready to go home. Jobless." Olivia gave a slight nod, masking the steely resolve in her eyes. She said nothing, but every word, every expression, every sideways glance from the workers, she was recording it all. As the first departure whistle shrieked across the yard, signaling the morning train's departure, Olivia stood still, watching the cars begin to pull away. Inside that train ran a whole system built on silence, and her mission was to awaken the truth. The sound of heavy footsteps hitting the concrete, sharp, deliberate, and intimidating, signaled the arrival of Jonas Blake, the man every worker at Rock Ridge Station knew all too well and feared. Jonas wasn't particularly tall, but the way he moved through the crowd made no one dare lift their head. His face was gaunt from lack of sleep, but his eyes were razor-sharp. He always had an unlit vape between his lips, and his voice was as rough as metal grinding on steel rails. "Liv Monroe, right?" Jonas stopped directly in front of Olivia, scanning her from head to toe. "Transferred from Denver," she answered. "Don't care where you came from. Here, I'm the law. And the law is no arguing, no delays, no questions." Olivia nodded, bowing her head like a proper rookie. But inside she had already started recording. Jonas led her to the Southern Tech Bay, where trains were supposed to be checked every 48 hours for brakes, pressure valves, and onboard electronics. But instead of a full inspection protocol, Olivia found only a 2-page checklist. Most boxes casually ticked OK, without anyone actually doing the work. "You'll be on brake duty. Just confirm the green light. No need to open anything," Jonas said coldly. She glanced at Benji. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground. A nearby worker installing a sensor system leaned over and whispered while Jonas turned away. "We've had 2 flagged issues this year, but he said, it's human error, not mechanical." So, that's how the report got written. "Has anyone ever filed a complaint to upper management?" Olivia asked quietly. "Why do you think the guy before you is on medical leave?" During an afternoon inspection, Olivia witnessed Jonas tear up a report noting pressure valve faults, then ordered the technician to re-sign a new version marked "All Clear." She kept her composure, but inside her coat pocket, the mini camera had just started recording. With each passing hour, the truth became clearer. Jonas wasn't just a tyrant. He was the linchpin of the entire cover-up system. That evening, back in the small company-issued lodging for rotational staff, Olivia opened her encrypted laptop and uploaded the footage. On the screen, she typed slowly, "Jonas Blake, Center of the Inspection Manipulation System, risk level high." She turned off the light. Outside the window, the wail of the night train echoed, a grim reminder that if this system continued to run in the dark, more lives would be lost. On Wednesday morning, Rock Ridge Station was wrapped in a thick, biting fog. Olivia, still undercover as Liv Monroe, moved quickly past a line of aging train cars, clipboard in hand, eyes seemingly scanning for equipment. But in truth, she was headed toward the Old West maintenance wing, a section few even remembered still existed. The door was locked with an electronic pad and sealed off with red tape labeled, "Out of service, do not enter." Pasted over it was a handwritten note, "Not in use, as per technical directive dated January 12th. That was the same time the so-called non-existent accident had allegedly occurred, according to internal reports. Olivia glanced around. No one was watching. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small lock decoding device, disguised as a standard resistance meter. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open and the heavy hinges let out a deep creak. Inside was a storage room thick with dust, but not abandoned. There were fresh boot prints, drag marks from equipment crates. She switched on her flashlight. Scattered around were brake units, pressure sensors, and control circuits. Some still bore inspection tags marked in red, "Unstable pressure fault, unsafe for operation." "Fails deceleration delay threshold, replacement required." Beneath a dust cover, she found a document box. Olivia opened it silently. Inside were printed records of internal test results, and more disturbingly, an accident report titled, "Eric Baines, date of death, January 12th, cause, slipped while dismounting train." She froze. Eric Baines, the same name mentioned in the anonymous letter. But within the report was a redacted page, crossed out heavily. "Possible brake malfunction. Further investigation needed." Olivia quickly photographed every page, folded them carefully, and erased any trace of her presence. Just as she stepped outside, she heard heavy footsteps. Jonas, making one of his random rounds. She pretended to be noting readings near the main power panel, sweat forming at her temple. Jonas eyed the area where she stood, but showed no visible suspicion. He simply muttered, "Don't go snooping around the West Wing. That place is already shut down." Olivia gave a small nod, but inside her thoughts surged. That place was never truly shut down. It was buried. That night, she reviewed the images she'd captured. The pieces were connecting, and the man named Eric Baines, officially listed as walked off the job, may have actually died due to faulty equipment that Jonas had covered up. The anonymous letter hadn't lied. The accident had happened, and someone had tried to erase it, but hadn't erased enough. 2 days after the sealed storage room break-in, tension at Rock Ridge Station hung thick in the air. Jonas Blake had grown more erratic, his face colder than usual, his eyes constantly scanning like a predator on the hunt. Word among the technicians was that he suspected someone had broken into the locked area and had ordered a full internal camera review. At the morning briefing, the crew stood in tight lines beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Jonas held a clipboard in one hand, his voice heavy like a hammer striking steel. "As of today, anyone caught entering restricted zones without authorization will be suspended immediately. No exceptions." A chill passed through the room. But just as Jonas prepared to end the meeting, A voice rang out. Then no one should be suspended if maintenance is done by the book. Heads turned. It was Carmen Wu, the only young female engineer on the team, her hair tied back neatly, eyes burning with fire. Jonas spun toward her. His voice dropped low, sharp and threatening. What exactly are you implying, Wu? Carmen didn't flinch. She stepped forward, speaking clearly. I'm saying that if brakes were replaced on time, if sensors were inspected properly, there wouldn't be incidents everyone here knows have happened. A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Jonas gripped the clipboard tighter. The girl had just broken the unspoken rule of silence he'd enforced for years. You'd better watch what you say. I've been watching it long enough, Carmen replied, eyes unblinking. From the back of the line, Olivia tightened her grip on her pen. In that moment, she knew Carmen was the only one brave enough to speak the truth. Their eyes met. Carmen wasn't afraid, just tired, as if she'd waited a long time for someone to finally listen. That afternoon, Olivia heard the news. Carmen had been reassigned to the logistics department for internal disruption. Her engineering title was stripped, her access badge downgraded, and she was relocated to the Southside warehouse. No one protested. No one said a word. The punishment unfolded in silence. But Olivia was different. She remembered the anonymous letter, the shaky but determined handwriting, the words that had haunted her from the first moment. More people will die if no one speaks up. A question echoed in Olivia's mind. Could Carmen be the one who wrote the letter? And if so, the girl was now taking the fall for the entire system. That night, back in her tiny company-provided room, Olivia reopened the Eric Baines file. She picked up her notebook and wrote one line. Carmen, brave, standing alone against the machine. I won't let her fall. The battle lines were drawn, and the first person Olivia had to save was the only one willing to tell the truth. After Carmen's demotion, a heavy silence settled over Rock Ridge Station. Conversations among the technicians grew cautious. Everyone feared the cameras, feared being named. But for Olivia, the incident only solidified her belief that something serious was being hidden, and she had to act fast before all traces were wiped clean. That night, Olivia returned to the technical office wing. She waited until the clock struck 11 p.m. The final shift had cleared out. Wearing her old technician uniform and gloves, she pulled a small laptop from a hidden compartment in her tool bag and slipped into the data archive room, the place where all electronic logs and maintenance reports were stored. The internal server hummed faintly as it booted up. Olivia logged in using the temporary technician credentials she'd been issued. She navigated to the maintenance logs for the Denver Rock Ridge line, but as she scrolled through the last 3 months of technical logs, nothing. No data. Data that used to be there had been deleted. She switched over to the technician assignment board. A list appeared, but abruptly stopped at week 14. The earlier the dates, the more gaps she found. She checked the brake inspection logs. The entire section titled Class C Brake, Second Phase Inspection, had vanished. Olivia frowned. Backup copies had to be stored in a separate system partition. She pulled out a concealed USB stick and plugged it into a secondary port. It took over 10 minutes of deep digging before she accessed a hidden system folder named Archived Review/Hold Logs. And there, an undisturbed audio file still remained. She opened it. The sound was faint at first. Then 2 men's voices emerged. What about the Rock Ridge incident? Forget it. That accident doesn't exist on paper. If she asks, say it was unauthorized leave. But that tech died on the tracks, Jonas. Even better, no witness left. Olivia froze. The second voice was unmistakably Jonas. The other, calm, cold, belonged to Gerald Knox, Vice President of Operations. She hit stop. Her heart pounded. This was no longer speculation. A fatal accident had been covered up. And now she had her first piece of hard evidence. She saved the recording to the USB, encrypted it with her private password. As she removed the device, Olivia turned toward the glass window of the archive room. In the distance, just beyond the fence line, a pickup truck sat parked in the shadows, headlights off. The engine was running, and she was certain someone was watching. There was no more time. She exited quickly, crossed the rail yard, and headed straight for her temporary lodging. The Lexington night was eerily still, but Olivia knew she had just stepped into a hornet's nest, and the hornets, very likely, would not let her walk away unharmed. The next day, winds swept through Lexington, carrying with them the damp, metallic scent Olivia had grown used to since working at the Rock Ridge line. She left the station earlier than usual, boarding a local bus with the small USB drive clenched tightly in her coat pocket. Her destination, a migrant housing complex in the city's southern outskirts, where the widow of Eric Baines, the technician who had died on the job, still lived with their young daughter. The third-floor apartment was modest. The curtains were faded, the furniture worn but tidy. Janelle Baines, the young widow, greeted Olivia with eyes heavy from grief and years of silence. "I don't talk to reporters," Janelle said softly, her hands clutching a framed family photo. Olivia didn't rush to explain who she was. Instead, she placed a copy of the anonymous letter on the table, next to a printed transcript of the recording from the night before. "I don't believe your husband walked off the job," Olivia said calmly, "and I think the company deliberately erased him from the records." A thick silence filled the room. Janelle stared at the papers. A minute passed, and then the tears began to fall. They said Eric left his shift to go drinking, that he'd been warned multiple times for misconduct. Do you believe that? Number Eric never missed a shift. Not one. 10 years without a single sick day. Always came home on time. Olivia nodded, then opened her laptop. She pulled up a faint, 6-month-old local news article. Man struck and killed by train near Rock Ridge Industrial Zone. Suspected workplace accident. No name, no photo, no follow-up. Janelle clenched her fists. I filed over 15 complaints to Silver Line's HR department. Not a single response. A lawyer once contacted me, and then suddenly disappeared. Do you know someone named Gerald Knox? The VP of Operations. I saw him once, at an employee awards ceremony. Very powerful. Olivia recorded every detail. As she prepared to leave, Janelle handed her a small wooden box. Inside was Eric's old technician's notebook, filled with handwritten entries of every shift, every reported system issue. I've kept this like a keepsake, Janelle said. Maybe it can help you. On the ride back, Olivia flipped through the pages. March 14th, 4:35 p.m. Auxiliary brake error triggered. Reported to Jonas. Denied train stoppage. Told to handle later. 2 weeks after that entry, Eric was dead. She closed the notebook, her chest tightening. They didn't just kill him, Olivia thought. They tried to erase him from the company's memory. But with her, that memory had just been restored, and it would never be buried again. That night, Olivia returned to Rock Ridge Station later than usual. A light drizzle pattered on the metal roof. The entire technical wing was dark, save for the faint glow from a small room at the end of the corridor, the maintenance records archive. She slipped the door open, checking carefully to make sure no security cameras were pointed her way. In her hands were Eric Baines's notebook and an external hard drive for data backup. She was looking for the crew roster from 6 months ago, the night of the accident. According to Janelle, Eric had been scheduled for the night shift, but internal records claimed he had walked off duty. A glaring inconsistency that couldn't be ignored. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Olivia froze and shut off the desk lamp. She ducked behind a steel shelving unit. The door creaked open, and in stepped a short, grey-haired man with a security radio. Roy, the night guard. He lingered for a moment, scanning the room, then closed the door without noticing her. Olivia exhaled, but she knew she couldn't stay much longer. She quickly pulled a file labeled Denver Rock Ridge Line Q1 Archives and found something that made her pulse spike. A brake inspection slip from the week before the accident, altered in a different ink. The original line, "System fault, replacement required," had been changed to "pass, no replacement needed." She photographed every page, then plugged the USB into the terminal to begin copying data. Just then, the door slammed open again. This time it was Jonas Blake. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was sharp, slicing through the room. Olivia was still in her technician uniform, face half covered by a mask, but Jonas's eyes narrowed, as if suspicion had been building for some time. Carmen asked me to check the equipment logs," Olivia said, forcing her voice to sound tired and meek. "At this hour?" "I'm still adjusting to shift rotations. Thought I'd stay late to keep up." Jonas stepped closer, staring into her face. For a second it looked like he might tear away her disguise. But then, he smirked and nodded. "Lock up when you're done. And don't cross any lines if you want to stay here long." He turned and left. But Olivia knew a line had been crossed. He was watching her now, and danger was closing in. The next morning, Carmen Wu was summoned to Jonas's office. No one knew what happened inside, but when she emerged, her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "They know," she whispered to Olivia later in the warehouse. "I've been forbidden to speak to new personnel. They threatened to fire me." Olivia clenched her fists. The game was no longer about hiding her identity. This was now a fight, life or death, between truth and power. Carmen Wu had tried to stay silent, tried to endure after being demoted to logistics. But what she saw each day, substandard components installed on outgoing trains, inspection reports rushed to meet deadlines, made it impossible to keep quiet. One night, in a moment of desperation, Carmen sent a second anonymous letter, this time not to the director directly, but slipped into the secure internal mailbox of the communications department, a division that had once promised to protect the identity of whistleblowers. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote, brief and raw. "Someone has died, and more will. Check the Rock Ridge Maintenance Depot. Everyone knows, but no one speaks. Please, don't ignore this again." What she didn't know was that the so-called anonymous system had quietly been altered months earlier by Jonas and Gerald Knox, reconfigured to log internal IP addresses, timestamps, and device metadata. Within 24 hours, Jonas received a data extract report. The name Si Wu stood out, bold and undeniable. That night, Olivia, still disguised as Liv Monroe, spotted Jonas leaving his office with a calculating expression. She decided to follow him from a distance. Jonas drove to a quiet restaurant on the edge of town, where a middle-aged man was already waiting. It was Gerald Knox, Vice President of Operations at Silverline, a man who only appeared when serious damage control was needed. Silently, Olivia placed a recording device behind a nearby bench, then melted into the shadows. "Carmen Wu," Jonas said firmly. "She sent another letter. I've got the logs. It's clear." Gerald nodded slowly. "She's a risk, but I'm more concerned about the second one. The new tech. Monroe, her record's too clean." "I don't buy it." Jonas frowned. "I've got someone watching her. If we need to, we'll get rid of both." That final line sliced through Olivia like a knife. She clenched her fists. Tonight the truth had moved one step closer, but she also understood the rules had changed. This was no longer just surveillance. This was war. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The early light outside Rock Ridge Station was still dull and grey. Last night's rain had left streaks across the windows, the lingering moisture casting a damp, chilling weight in the air. Carmen Wu arrived early, just like she always did. Her hair was tied neatly at the back, and in her hand she carried a small lunch container. But something was different. A nervous flicker in her eyes, a tightness in her lips pressed together. Ever since daring to challenge Jonas publicly, she had felt strange stares behind her back, eyes that lingered too long, footsteps that stopped just before she turned around. Around 10 a.m., as she was reviewing a brake system diagram from the previous shift, a cold, mechanical voice rang out over the intercom. "Carmen Wu, supervisor's office, immediately." No one spoke. For a moment it felt like the entire workshop had been drained of sound. Carmen stood frozen. Then slowly she set the folder down and gave a slight nod. The kind of nod one gives when they've been expecting the worst for a long time. She walked away, her steps slow and heavy, as if each one marked the passing of a sentence being carried out. Olivia, still posing as Liv Monroe, watched silently. She wanted to say something, to stop her, but she only shook her head faintly. Not now, not with cameras watching. She knew she had to wait. And listen. 30 minutes later. The office door creaked open. Carmen stepped out, but she was no longer the Carmen from that morning. Her face was pale, her chin trembling. Her eyes were red, as if she had cried, but the tears had been held back by sheer force of will. In her hands was a large envelope, stamped with cold, bold letters. "Notice of temporary suspension." No one said a word. A few glanced sideways, then turned away. Some bowed their heads and kept working. And a few, the ones who truly understood, said nothing at all. Because silence was something they had learned to survive with. Carmen walked straight to the locker area. Olivia followed quietly, keeping a distance. She watched as the young woman collapsed onto a metal bench, her shoulders shaking silently. Olivia didn't hesitate. She sat beside her and said nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then Carmen broke the silence. Her voice was cracked and fragile. I knew this day would come. I just didn't think it would hurt this much." Olivia turned, meeting her eyes. "Carmen, I know you wrote that letter, but this morning, I knew for sure you wrote the second one too." Carmen nodded slowly, her lips pressed together again. A single tear dropped, landing right on the edge of the envelope in her hands. "I saw Jonas alter the brake inspection schedule for line 237. It had failed months ago. No one dared report it because that would trigger a full audit of the outdated production system. I was terrified that another accident would happen, just like with Eric." Her voice cracked into sobs. I saw Eric standing there, trying to stop the train from leaving the platform. I heard his voice yelling through the radio. And then I heard the impact, the sound that I can never unhear. Olivia felt a weight in her chest, a collision of rage, grief, and helplessness that no words could express. I'm Olivia Renner. Carmen looked up, her eyes widened, stunned, disbelieving. I'm the CEO of Silverline Express. I came here because of the first letter you wrote, and because of the truth no one else dared to speak. Carmen couldn't find the words. She just stared at Olivia, as if the woman before her was a hope she had once dreamed of, but never believed could be real. Olivia gently took her hand. I can't undo the past, but I promise you, no one else will have to die for silence. No one will be forced to shut up. No one will be left behind. A long pause followed. No words, none were needed. And then Carmen nodded, slowly, but with certainty. This fight was no longer just hers. 2:57 a.m. Rockridge Station was deathly quiet. The wind whispered through rows of idle train cars like sleeping ghosts. Inside the old decommissioned technical office, once a break room for maintenance workers before it was sealed off, a single flashlight flickered to life. Inside, Olivia, Carmen, and two other technicians, Luis Ortega and Marla Chen, huddled around a worn wooden table, now covered in schematics, documents, tablets, and a laptop not connected to any network. Luis was the first to break the silence. We've got 35 minutes before the first crew comes in to run morning checks. I checked. Cameras in here were disabled last month. No one expects this room to be used again. Olivia nodded. Thank you. From now on, everything you share here will be encrypted, stored off-site, and backed up in a secure location. I'll take full responsibility. Marla opened an old file folder. She whispered, "This is the original break schematic for line 237, before Jonas had it altered. And this is the version after he ordered process simplification." She pointed to a red-marked section. It was instantly obvious. An entire braking force sensor cluster had been removed in the updated version. Carmen spoke up, her hands trembling as she held a USB stick. I hid this inside the ventilation shaft of the logistics room. It's a recording, internal audio between Jonas and the lead engineer from March. They played the file. No one reads those warning flags anyway. Just replace the inspection report with the pre-filled version. I sent the download link. But if there's an accident, blame operator error. You just handle your part. The air in the room turned heavy as lead. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, then opened her personal laptop. I have one more file. It was recorded at 11:47 p.m. 2 nights ago, from a covert camera placed inside the tool cabinet. The screen lit up. Jonas entered the parts storage room, inspected a faulty sensor. He wrote in the logbook, "Meets technical standards," even though the device was clearly chipped, the cable visibly frayed. At the end of the footage, he pulled the door shut, sealed it, then called Gerald Knox, Vice President of Operations. Only one person's still suspicious, some live something, poking around everywhere. Want to kick her out like we did with that Wu girl. If she's still here by the weekend, I'm not responsible for what happens. Carmen clenched her fists. Marla sighed. Luis muttered a curse under his breath. Olivia shut the laptop. Her gaze was steady. We have enough, documents, audio, video. But if we want the truth to matter, we need a strike. Public, unignorable. She turned to Carmen. Any upcoming events with lots of people? Senior leadership present? Carmen replied instantly, The statewide Transportation Safety Conference. This year's theme is Trust and Accountability. Olivia smiled, not out of joy, but with the conviction of someone ready to tear the mask off a lie. Then I'll go public there. Luis shot upright. Are you out of your mind? If they find out you're the CEO and you gathered all this off-protocol, they'll take you to court. Olivia didn't blink. I'm ready, but I won't let another person die or live like a ghost inside their own job. 3:32 a.m. The meeting ended. No one spoke as they left the room, but in each pair of eyes something long buried flickered back to life. Hope and belief. Grand Dominion Hotel, Colorado State Conference Center. 9:04 a.m. Inside the main hall, over 400 attendees had gathered. Railway engineers, safety inspectors, government representatives, and local reporters. Across the large stage hung a gleaming banner. Statewide Railway Safety Conference, co-hosted by Silver Line Express. Gerald Knox, Vice President of Operations, stood confidently at the podium, speaking with practiced ease. We are proud to report, this year, Silver Line Express has achieved its lowest accident rate since 2018. Trust has been restored, and thanks to continued innovation, our operations are stronger than ever. Applause echoed throughout the room, but in the last row, a woman in a grey-blue technician's uniform, hard hat, and safety glasses stood quietly. She began walking down the center aisle, eyes turned toward her. A news camera pivoted to follow. The host stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Excuse me, we're in the middle of a scheduled presentation." The woman removed her glasses. It was Olivia. Olivia Renner, Chief Executive Officer of Silver Line Express. A collective gasp swept the room. In different corners of the audience, Carmen Wu, Luis Ortega, and Marla Chen rose to stand, positioned like anchors in a perfectly timed plan. Olivia took the microphone. Her voice was low, deliberate, but crystal clear. "My name is Olivia Renner. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Silver Line Express, and I'm here to tell the truth." The room fell completely silent, every eye locked on her. 6 months ago, an accident occurred on the Rock Ridge line. A worker, his name was Eric Baines, died when the train's braking system failed. The official report claimed he abandoned his post. But the truth is, the equipment was faulty, and that same faulty equipment is still being reused today. No one dared to even breathe. Gerald Knox sat frozen, his expression slowly draining of color. I went undercover as a technician to investigate, after receiving an anonymous letter warning that more people would die if I didn't act. And what I found was deleted documents, altered schematics, falsified inspections, and upper-level orders telling employees not to ask too many questions. Whispers began to spread. Some reporters turned on their voice recorders. Olivia raised a USB drive into view. This contains a recorded conversation between Jonas Blake, technical supervisor, and Mr. Gerald Knox. In it, they discuss how to cover up faulty equipment, manipulate inspection reports, and threaten whistleblowers. She paused. Her gaze swept the hall. Carmen Wu, an engineer at the Rock Ridge station, had the courage to speak up and was demoted for it. She sent the first letter, and when I didn't respond fast enough, she sent the second. At that moment, Carmen stepped onto the stage, standing beside Olivia. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly but firm. I thought I'd be fired, but I couldn't stay silent. Not when I watched a colleague die because of something that should have been fixed. A lone clap came from the back of the hall, then another, Then it spread. Gerald Knox sprang to his feet. "This is outrageous. A political stunt. She's using her position to smear the executive team." Olivia turned to him, calm and unshaken. "I've already sent all the evidence to the Federal Department of Transportation, and today I'm giving it to everyone in this room." The screen behind her lit up, playing the footage of Jonas falsifying inspection results. A few jaws dropped. Most others sat in stunned silence. The truth was now undeniable. Stop covering it up. Start fixing it. Let it begin here. And now. This time the applause wasn't scattered. The entire room stood. Cameras scanned the crowd. Some attendees wiped away tears. And below the stage, Gerald Knox collapsed back into his chair, his eyes hollow. 15 minutes after Olivia's public disclosure of evidence at the conference, Silver Line Express headquarters, executive operations floor, level 25. The tension in the room was suffocating. An emergency meeting had been called. Inside sat the company's top leadership. The head of legal, director of human resources, board representatives, and, summoned unexpectedly, Gerald Knox and Jonas Blake. Olivia entered. Gone was the technician's uniform. She now wore a sharp black suit, her gaze steely, a document case in hand. "Let's not waste time," Olivia began. "I'll be direct. 2 individuals in this room have been directly involved in covering up faulty equipment, falsifying records, and threatening staff." Jonas snapped back, voice sharp. "You have no authority to accuse me. I was following orders from above." Olivia nodded slightly. "And who exactly is above you? The person who approved maintenance budget cuts? The man sitting right there?" She pointed directly at Gerald Knox. The room fell into stunned silence. "This is the investigation file from the Federal Transportation Safety Commission, submitted last week. They've launched an inquiry. We have recordings, video evidence, and over a dozen witness statements from technicians, inspection engineers, and even members of the finance department." She threw a thick folder onto the table. Bold letters on the cover read, "Special Investigation, Category, Severe Rail System Maintenance Violations." Jonas turned pale. Gerald tried to maintain composure, but his fingers trembled. Olivia turned to the board representatives. "I move to immediately suspend both individuals and refer their cases to federal investigators." The director of HR nodded. "We reviewed the evidence presented at this morning's session. It constitutes sufficient grounds for emergency suspension." The door opened. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in. "Jonas Blake, you are being taken into custody for questioning. You have the right to remain silent." Jonas panicked, shouting, "It was Knox. He gave the orders. I have a family. I can't lose this job." Gerald sprang to his feet. "You can't arrest me. I'm the executive vice president." But Olivia stood calmly, placing a red envelope before him. "As of this moment, you're the former executive vice president. This is a board-authorized termination, effective immediately." The room erupted into chaos. Jonas was cuffed. Gerald struggled but was restrained. Both were led out through the hallway, lined with Silver Line employees. People who had once been silenced. People who had once been afraid. Now they stood in silence, but their eyes spoke volumes. Judgment had arrived. 1 week later, Carmen Wu returned to Rock Ridge Station, now wearing a light grey business suit. At a full station assembly, Olivia stood at the front and made the announcement herself. "I hereby appoint Engineer Carmen Wu as Regional Safety Supervisor, in charge of overhauling all inspection protocols." Thunderous applause followed. Carmen stood frozen for a moment, then stepped up to the podium, eyes brimming with tears. "I never thought I'd get to come back, but today I stand here, not for revenge, but to make sure no one else is ever silenced the way I was." Later that evening, Olivia sat alone in her office. Before her, the Silver Line route map glowed softly on screen, one station after another lighting up green, like a system being reborn. She picked up the phone and called the national head of engineering. "Initiate a full audit of the entire system. No station exempt. We rebuild from scratch, and this time no one gets left behind." She hung up, then turned toward the window. Sunset fell over Lexington, but this time it was peace. Following the seismic eruption at the statewide safety conference, the aftershocks of truth rippled through the entire Silver Line Express network like an unprecedented earthquake. News of the immediate suspension of two senior executives, Gerald Knox and Jonas Blake, for covering up a fatal accident and manipulating safety data spread across every headline, every evening broadcast. But for Olivia Renner, that was only the beginning. She returned to headquarters and spent nearly the entire following week working side by side with the legal team, the Internal Reform Task Force, and representatives from the Federal Department of Transportation. What they were about to implement wasn't just personnel discipline, it was a system-wide transformation. In less than 10 days, Silver Line announced a sweeping reform. The Blue Watch program, a fully independent technical and safety oversight system, immune from the influence of any regional operations executive. Every train line would now have an autonomous coordination unit directly connected to the CEO's office. But Olivia didn't stop there. She signed an executive order to establish the Whistleblower Protection Board, an internal organization empowered to absolutely safeguard the identity and rights of any employee who reported misconduct. Any form of retaliation, even covert, would now be considered a serious violation of company policy. Carmen Wu was the first person invited to join the Blue Watch founding team. With her hands-on experience from the Rock Ridge Line and a courage forged through adversity, she became the face of a new generation of leadership at Silver Line, one that not only understood the risks, but had the resolve to confront the culture of fear head-on. Simultaneously, Silver Line launched a support fund for families affected by railway accidents. The Eric Baines Foundation, named after the worker whose death had been buried in silence. Its mission, to provide financial aid, legal advocacy, and mental health care for the families of victims. At train stations, especially hotspots like Rock Ridge, the atmosphere had shifted. Where once there had been silence, now there was open dialogue about technical safety. Stories were being shared, improvement suggestions were being made. Entire walls were now lined with notices for listening days, sessions where representatives from the Independent Coordination Office would meet with staff by department, by team, even one-on-one. Olivia now traveled the rail lines not to inspect, but to listen. She had lunch with mechanics, shook hands with loading crews, asked thoughtful questions of operations engineers. No one called her CEO. They still called her Liv. But this time the name came with grateful eyes, because now they knew if something went wrong, someone would truly hear them. Late afternoon, the last rays of sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the top floor at Silver Line Express headquarters. Olivia Renner's office was unusually quiet. Most meetings had wrapped. Staff were trickling out for the day. And for the first time in weeks of breathless urgency, she finally had a moment to sit, in silence. On her desk, amid a stack of unopened technical reports, sat something unfamiliar, a pale brown envelope. No sender's name, no office stamp, just a plain envelope, carefully placed. Olivia opened it gently. Inside was a handwritten note scribbled in blue ink. The handwriting leaned slightly, unpolished, unrefined, but there was something deeply sincere about it. You don't need to know who I am. I'm just one small voice among thousands that were ignored. But you listened. You stepped into the dark, without fear, without hesitation, to do what hundreds couldn't. Because of you, I no longer feel alone. Thank you for turning silence into action. Thank you for believing that even one letter could be the start of change. Olivia placed the letter down and leaned back in her chair. She didn't need to know who had written it. No investigation, no confirmation. It was enough to know that somewhere, within this vast system, there were people who still believed, still hoped, and still chose to write, whether with a sentence or with an act. She turned to the window. Below, the silver-lined trains kept rolling toward the horizon, no longer in silence, no longer in fear. Olivia spoke softly, a whispered promise to the past, and to every small voice that had never been heard. Don't worry, I'm still listening. And this time, I'm not listening alone. Some revolutions don't begin with a roar. They begin with a whisper. Some of the strongest don't wear armor. They simply carry a heart steady enough to listen to what others chose to ignore. Olivia Renner didn't arrive cloaked in the glory of a CEO. She walked into a place built on fear and falsehoods. Not to command, but to understand. Not to punish, but to illuminate. And the miracle was this. A single quiet letter opened the door to truth. One silent act saved not just a life, but an entire workplace culture that had long withered in fear and silence. This story isn't just about Silverline, it's about all of us. The ones who've thought, I'm too small to make a difference. But the truth is, it's the smallest voices that often spark the biggest changes. When someone is willing to truly listen, what if the next person to step into the dark is you? Leave a comment below. Tell us a story you've witnessed, where silence needed to be broken. And if you believe in the power of truth, don't forget to follow this channel, because here, we don't tell fairy tales, we tell buried truths, and the people brave enough to bring them into the light.